Hey, Africans. How y'all doing? Happy New Year to you. In this hemisphere. Because you know in the hemisphere over in Kemet, it's in July when it's warm. And you know why it's during the cold here. But we're going to deal with that anyway. And I look for it to be a very special year for us as a people. I believe that. And of course, so much of that is dependent upon what we do, our attitude towards the year and the life itself. I want to give thanks and honor to the Creator, revealed to all and known by many names. I want to give thanks to our ancestors, our positive ancestors, who made it possible for us to exist and to be here today. Especially do I give honor to those who not only gave us life, but put their life on the line that we might have life. For those who not only put their lives on the line, but even more so gave it up and shed their blood so that we may have a better life. To them we owe the greatest honor and the highest praise. And so it is in the words of the last poets that I say to you, in their honor, blessed are those who struggle. You know it. Oppression is worse than the grave. It is better to live and die for a noble cause than to live and die a slave. So, my brothers and sisters, it is indeed, as always, an honor to be with you tonight for many reasons. You know the high respect and regard I have for Brother Alton and all the people who work with him here. I don't have to tell you his pedigree in the Black Liberation Movement. That is well known, not only here, but let me tell you something. Wherever I travel, there is respect for the slave theater. Now, I want you to listen to me a minute. The slave theater is to African-centered thinking and philosophy and tradition and outright way of life what the Apollo Theater used to be to the black entertainment world. And you really aren't considered to be anybody, Dr. Jeffries, in this field until you have been to the slave theater. Then you become somebody in this field. So I feel like somebody tonight. I'm also always very glad to be here because this is one place that I go to that I know ain't no white folks going to be in here. And that makes me extra comfortable because, you know, a lot of places we go to, well, you know, if we got to let the white folks in, if we don't, I mean, in fact, black folks stopped coming out to hear me because I didn't want no white folks in there. So I had to let the white folks in, Brother Arthur, so I can talk to some black folks, you understand? The other thing, you all have got to be the most educated, and I use that word understanding what I'm talking about. I use that word as it is used in this language, the Latin root educa, meaning to bring out the best in someone. You have to be the most educated Africans, among the most educated Africans on this planet. Everybody in here at least has the equivalency of a PhD. If we were to put you to the test with all this information that stands before you, if we were to put you to the test and have them work on their doctoral dissertation, I'm sure I'd get at least one for each one of you up in here with all this information now. So you're very privileged, and it's always an honor to be in your midst, and you have to know what you're talking about when you come up in here. You cannot come up in here half-stepping. You have to be able to back it up very well, and that's always, like I said, to me, like putting a rabbit in the briar patch. I'm more than happy to do that. Several things I must do before going directly into our message tonight, which is entitled Some Historical Facts on a Black Revolutionary Called Jesus. We will be dealing with that from an historical frame of reference. I didn't come to discuss religion tonight. I came to discuss history. I'm approaching it as a scientist tonight, not as a theologian, even though I do have qualified credentials in that area. But I come as a historian today and as a black nationalist freedom fighter. And I always like to make that very clear so that people will know who's talking to them. I do not come to attack anyone's system of belief tonight or to try to disconnect you from your system of belief. However, you know we must look at the other side of the coin. Because if you don't see both sides of the story, you'll only know that, but you'll never know this. So you have to have those two things in order to make an intelligent choice. My brothers and sisters, there's one more thing I have to do before going into that. And I am always compelled to do what we call a black nationalist commercial. Not that we're commercializing what we're doing. However, I don't have to tell you it cannot be done without your support. Now, that's just plain and clear. So I'm not going through that again. You know what that situation is about. But I tell you, I got some new things for you tonight. I need about 5 minutes on that, Brother Austin. You keep asking me, you say, Brother Barashango, when is the next book coming out? And I keep wanting to say to you, you got any money? Can you let me hold some money? Because if you can let me hold some money, I can get you another book out. I got at least 10 in my files that I haven't finished. But I need some money to finish them. They just don't finish that. The last time I took the risk, again, I've done it before now. I took the risk of not even taking any speaking engagement, dropping everything, and totally concentrating on writing a book. Was the book, The Real Jesus Was a Black Man. And the sheriff came and sat my behind in the street. Because some people who told me they were going to do such and such, according to the contracts that we had, did not do it. And even till the last minute, they said, don't worry about it. I said, I need to pack my stuff and do something now. I got to do something. I got to hook up with some brothers and do some appropriations or something. Those who have an ear understand what I'm talking about with appropriation. But I need to do something. Say, don't worry about it, brother. And when the sheriff came, said, I'm sorry, I can't come through. So I have learned not to try to concentrate on writing a book unless I got some ducats behind me, brother. So I'm sorry to take so long to get another one out, but I tell you what I got. Let me show you what I have been able to do here and share with you a few things in reference to this. You will see them out in the lobby as you go. High-quality videotapes. And one of the messages that I like so much and you like so much is, will the real Jesus please stand up? And I got it in color this time. Now, I think by looking, you can tell who's the fake and who the real is there. But this one of the messages delivered at the Slave Theater on video. Also on video, I have the history of our people from 200,000 years ago up into the Roman period on slides, a slide presentation. That tape is entitled Portrait of the Eternal People. African woman, the original guardian angel, and we got a color cover on that now, too. We're moving up now. Was delivered at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, the beautiful Shrine of Black Madonna in Houston, Texas. That is also on video. African people and European holidays, a mental genocide. My first message at the Slave Theater, covering 5 holidays: Misgiving Day, Xmas, the 4th of July, Halloween, and Columbus Day. So all 5 of those are on there. And I don't believe I left any thing out. But African origin of the Christian church. Those are all there. Now, I spent the whole week, Brother Alton, working on new labels. And one of my favorites is, And the Word of the Lord Came by Marcus Garvey. Red, black, and green label. Full 90-minute tape. Another one of my favorites of a black liberation theologian is The Gospel According to Old Nat the Prophet. And not only are we talking about Nat Turner on there and what his gospel was about and his interpretation of the Bible, you need to deal with Nat Turner's interpretation of the Bible. His understanding of Jesus. We also talk about Brother Henry Harlan Garnett and some other liberation ministers. The one you've been asking about for a long time. The marital life of Jesus and his son Barabbas. Very well documented. I think you would want to deal with that one. And of course, you're familiar with some of the other ones, the African origin of the Christian church, black historical facts on the life of Jesus, and some others. Now, what I'm asking you to do is, before you leave here tonight, you stop by the table, that's no more than to shake my hand, and we bless one another. However, all those who can, don't go by that table. Now, don't let this keep you from coming to the table, because I want to greet you. But don't leave that table if you can at all do it without at least leaving $10 at that table tonight, and you will be blessed. Now, Reverend Ike say that, and he can't back it up, but I can back it up. If you bless that table tonight, I'm going to pray and fast all day tomorrow. Make sure everybody in here get a blessing. I ain't going to stop till I know that the Lord done blessed everybody up in here. So I look forward to you doing that. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for being so tolerant of that. And I'm sure you understand the importance of why we have to do it. Now, let's get on up into the message now. Let's do that. All right, are you ready? Now, I'm going to take my time. I'm not going to take long. But I know y'all are used to me moving like a steam engine sometimes. Spirit might hit me like that. I don't know. You know how I be sometimes when them ancestors get on, you don't know where you're going. But I am going to try to systematically follow the outline that I worked on in reference to this message. First of all, let's deal with the title. Some historical facts, not theological facts. One of the reasons why I changed fields after I passed the master's program, I was still a theologian. But something wasn't quite right to me, because you could argue that back and forth and it could go any kind of way. You could go through even there's over 500 and some different denominations of the Christian religion alone. I don't know how many of Islam. Just by Judaism, all of them have different denominations and sects. It's dependent upon somebody's interpretation or exegesis of a particular text or holy book. So there is no concrete analysis that you can have. There is no logical debate you can have with that. I just simply throw my hand and say, if that's your belief, that's your belief. I ain't going to deal with it. I ain't going to argue with it. I'm not going to waste any time on that. However, I looked at it, I said, history, you can at least prove with some degree of certainty, based on documentation, what your position is, what your premise is. So that's when I decided to switch fields. But I kept my ministerial license because I know how y'all love preaching. Okay? And I knew that would come in handy. So we're dealing with the historical facts tonight. Don't get upset with me about the historical fact. Don't jump up in my face talking about, but I don't believe that. We are not talking about your belief. We have every bit of respect for it. We will therefore not tread upon it. However, if the historical facts tread on it, do not blame it on your brother. Blame it on the historical facts. And of course, you have a right to your opinion on that. Black historical facts on a black revolutionary. We're not used to seeing Jesus or of conceiving of Jesus in that context as a black revolutionary. I trust that I will be able to make that case for you tonight. And this black revolutionary was called Jesus. He was one of the many black revolutionaries who lived in the land that he lived in Galilee at that time, in the little nation of Judea in that day. And I'm sure we will be discussing that as well. You all right? Now, we're going to break it down. This is actually part 2 that I didn't get to finish of Will the Real Jesus Please Stand Up? And I may have to come back and do a part 3 one day, Alton, because I don't think I'm going to finish everything today. I always have more material than I can get through. You understand anything about that, Brother Jeffries? Dr. Felder, you know anything about that? Always have more than I can get through. But we're going to do the best we can here tonight. I'm going to do it in several sections. The first section I want to address is Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's article, some excerpts from that, and we'll do a little discussion on that, the concept and color of God and black mental health. She does an excellent job with that, and we need to investigate it a little. Then we will go into why the New Testament, as it presently exists in the English Bibles or the European languages, has chosen to try to conceal the fact that Jesus was indeed a revolutionary and, in fact, historically a black revolutionary. After we have done that, we will go into the Bible itself and some other historical documentation, and we will establish that he was, in fact, involved in the movement of that day. At least he acted like it, and that he was, in fact, a black man involved in the revolutionary movement that the little kingdom of Judea was involved in as it was caught up in a life and death struggle with the white Roman Empire. Then, if time will permit, we will go into some contradictions in the New Testament relative to his arrest, conviction, and execution, assassination. But if not, at least you'll know where I was trying to get to, and we will cover as much as we can. We're still together? All right, let's begin now with Sister Frances Welsing. And she says this: long before there is true cognitive understanding, there is for even the very, very young child, the what? A participation in the practice of God recognition. This participation in practice becomes a part then of the child's and ultimately the adult's concept and image of self. Of what? It is from this self-image and self-concept that evolve all patterns of behavior, that the determination of mental health or mental illness is made. One's reflection of oneself and group respect and respect for harmony in the universe is also contingent on this factor. Now, let's do as we say in the seminary, an exegesis on the text. Let's exegete the text that has been presented to us in this sacred writing of Dr. Frances Welsing. She says, now, before you understand anything else in your life, before you're cognizant of anything else, the first concept or thought that is implanted in your psyche is what? God. Something relative to God while you are still in your mother's womb. Whatever your mother's attitude or the community around you attitude or concept or imagery is of a God force in the universe is injected into you while you are still in the development stages of your mother's womb. As your mind begins to formulate, as the melanin begins to grow and develop within you, and that divine intelligence that comes from the center of the universe that makes us so special as a people, there is automatically inherent within that a concept about a God force or divine force in the universe. We're born with it. We have it even before we're born. It's very natural to African people to think in those terms. They feel a connectedness with the universe that is beyond and above that which they can understand in their human experience. And therefore, the quest of most African people throughout our history has always been to travel a path that will bring us in closer connection with that divine intelligence in the universe. We have expressed it in a multiplicity of ways, and we still do. But we don't deal with the road, we deal with the what? The objective of where we're going. Now, we're born with this. We have this before we get here. And therefore begins our participation in the practice of a recognition of a God force in the universe. It's just not natural for most black people. I'm not telling you what to believe or what not to believe in the divine intelligence in the universe. We're just that way by nature. But I'm not saying you're bad if you don't. I'm just saying that's natural for most African people. Now it says that this participation in practice becomes a part then of the child and ultimately the adult's concept of themselves. In other words, your concept of yourself is directly related to your concept of God. Let me say that again. Every human being's concept, and I'm talking about in particular our people, African people, is directly related to their understanding and concept of God. Because they seek to live that out in their lives. Therefore, your behavior in all of your thoughts are governed by your basic concept of this God force or divine intelligence in the universe. Y'all still with me? And she says it is from this self-concept that all patterns of behavior are established. Also, your relationship as to how you will treat yourself and how you will treat the group that you come from and the people around you. Anyone, therefore, that will destroy themselves with drugs or any other type of negative, self-destructive behavior, therefore has a concept of God that is obviously erroneous. Because if they had the proper concept of the God force in them, they would be acting out that force in them and therefore could not destroy themselves. They could not do that. She goes on, and we're going to establish why. And I mean, it seems like the people who can possess God the most, that do more shouting in church than anybody and even can do more salamed up stuff, can do some of the most negative things. Why is that? When your God concept is the governing factor of your image of yourself and therefore your relationship to those who produced you and you relate to and live around. All right, we're moving on now. And we'll discuss that. I've seen young men that I've had to counsel who were involved in gang war. I have walked in the middle of gang wars in Richard Allen City, Miss Norman, Philadelphia. I've walked in the middle of them to stop them from hurting one another. And both of them stand on each side, Sister Camille, with crosses on. Would have killed one. Walk past the casket reciting the Lord's Prayer and touching the casket and stroking the cross. Something's wrong with their concept of God. When you can destroy yourself, we don't have the right to tell anybody how to believe or to practice their relationship with their Creator, but we can identify that something is wrong if your relationship with your Creator is permitting you to destroy yourself. One time I was having such trouble breaking up a gang war that I went back in the house and put on the collar. I'm serious. They wouldn't take it. I had my dashiki and everything. Come on, brothers, we can't believe it. I almost got wiped out. Security had to snatch me out of their midst. I say, I got the answer to this. I went and put my collar on. I came back out, man. They backed on off. Yeah, Reverend. Yeah. They had more respect for this white man's collar than they had for me. That's because something is wrong with their God recognition. Therefore, it has affected itself. You'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. She goes on to say that the global system of white supremacy, oppression, and domination developed a religion called Christianity. Uh-oh, please protect me out there. I need some security. Where's the security? We're not attacking your belief system. We're not attacking your belief system. However, this is a historical fact. There is a qualitative difference between the Christianity developed on the African continent and that developed by Europeans. They are diametrically opposed to one another. Get my tape, Black Historical Facts on Life of Jesus, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I get right on into that. How the Romans came in, not with no Septimus, Dominus, Meum, and all that praying and stuff. They came in with swords and took it and recast it in the image of white supremacy, and then took the most sacred and revered icons, which are the black Madonna and child, and of Jesus as a black man, and hid them away so that they could have the magic of healing that's in them. Think about the psyche of the people you're dealing with, but I don't care about them. Let's get back to it now. But they developed this global system of white supremacy, developed a religion and called it Christianity because Jesus knew nothing about Christianity. There was no Christianity in Jesus' day. Jesus was a Hebrew, and what he founded was the Nazarene party. He had no idea of founding a religion. If Jesus were to come back today and you ask him where most of y'all would throw him out of church in the first place with them dreadlocks and them sandals, dusty-looking prophet that he was, y'all wouldn't even want him in your church. But if you allowed him to come in and you ask him if he was a Christian, if he was saved, he would have no idea of what you were talking about. Because such concepts did not exist while Jesus was alive. Even in your Bible, in the book of Acts, it tells you they were not called Christians until Antioch, at least 50 years after the assassination of Jesus. Talking about historical facts now. Don't get mad, please. But even if you get mad, don't stop loving me. And you owe it to yourself. You hear this. It's as if there is nothing else that could possibly be talked about, thought about, or presented about Jesus other than that which 50,000 preachers run on Sunday morning every Sunday. The same old idea and concept with no historical basis. And we just follow right on behind it. And they get richer and wealthier, and we stay in the same condition. If your church is not committed to the upliftment and upgrading of your community, if that money is not going to enhance the quality of life in your community, then you have to rethink, as Brother Malcolm, peace be upon him, said, your religion and your concept of Jesus. Very fundamental. How these Negroes walk around here talking about they follow Jesus when history and the Bible tells everywhere the man went, he took care of the needs of people. Even the preachers of his day got mad, say, he's getting more, he's got a popular move. Folks ain't even coming to the synagogue no more. This black man got folks going to church out on mountainsides, feeding them fish and bread and stuff. We can't compete with that. We do that, them Romans come in and tear the synagogue down. But I'm moving a little ahead of myself now. But he developed this religion called Christianity. Because there's really nothing Christian about it if you go even with the basic Christian principles. Most fundamental and absolutely critical to the white supremacy system of religious thought was the formation of the image of a white man as the Son of God. Therein lies the problem. Our God recognition is recognizing a lie. Something that is not true. Because Francis goes on to tell us this white male image was then referred to as Christ. It doesn't matter that the prophet Jesus was a black man, which we have proven historically over and over again. I'm not going into that tonight. I got it on the tapes out there. You know I've been over that time and time again. So we got to move on with the material tonight. But he says absolutely critical. White supremacy could not exist, Brother Al. It could not exist. They could not control us if they had not gotten us strung out on a false premise about God. As Dr. Clark, that grand old scholar, tells us, they came here with a false idea about God and have never acted godly. Never acted godly. Therefore, with this image of white supremacy, that which, whether we recognize it in the superconscious mind or not, is certainly recognized deep within our souls and our subconscious mind. We know that white supremacy is destructive to us. Therefore, when we embrace it as a God, we become destructive to ourselves. You understand what's being said here now? Okay, a few more things. I'm moving on. I got to keep making sure you're with me now. Thus, any person accepting the Christian religion, whether conscious of it or not all of us are conscious of it. The image and concept of God as a white man. And y'all be telling me, well, see, I don't think of God as any color. It's a spiritual thing. Well, then take the white one down and put the black one up. Put the black one in your Bible. Put the black one on your cards if it don't make a difference. Tell the truth. What did Jesus say? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Truth meaning according to the facts. So put the factual one if it don't make it. The only time you start arguing about it don't make a difference is when we start talking about the reality historically that Jesus was a black man. Then you get to scratching your head and going through all kind of problems. Well, we don't want to talk about color. We don't want to. Well, then stop reading the Bible then. Revelation's first chapter, you know it, 13th to 15th verse. If I'm wrong to talk about color, then the Bible wrong to talk about color. Thus, any person accepting the Christian religion, whether conscious or not, has the image and concept of God as a white man. With this unconscious God is a white man logic circuit securely implanted. Good Lord. Check that out. Let me read that one more time. She said, with this unconscious, God is a white man logic circuit securely implanted. That means they have done a surgical job on your mind by misusing your spirituality and coming at you with religion and took your spirituality or much of your spiritual identity from you and replaced it with religion. And those two are separate things. Very separate things. Got you all strung out and fighting over religion when the power is in your spirituality, which means your connectedness, your awareness of your connectedness with the universe. So now securely implanted, the message becomes very clear. The white man, as God the Father, is supreme, perfect in power and goodness, from whom all blessings flow. Therefore, you're afraid to fight him. You ain't going to try to fight God. That's why there's such a fear to get up and fight these crackers. You don't want to fight God. You don't want to anger God. You don't want to upset God. You think he's God. And no matter what he does to you, and he's done the worst things that any human has ever done on the face of F-human, he can be indeed called, and I know some of y'all don't like to hear me say that, but I like that term. Dr. Patricia Newton said that massive undeveloped protoplasm, which is what he is. As human is as human does. Human from humus man. Man from the humus, from the soil, from the dark soil that contains all the elements that make up the human body. Is you with that? You understand what I'm saying to you? But so that I will not, I don't care really. Some of my brothers and sisters don't think I'm being mean by not referring to him as a human. I have to go, as I said, by the true, as Jesus said, by the what? Fruit of the tree shall you know. Yeah. So we're afraid to confront him. We're afraid to deal with him because we believe that we're dealing with God. And no matter how bad he treats you, you believe that somewhere among them has got to be a good one that's going to do us right because the Son of God was a good one. So someone of them got to be good. So you will take any abuse, any punishment, go on for years and submit yourself and your children to the worst ways of life, believing that somehow some white man will come and save you because 2,000 years ago one died on the cross for you and saved you from your sins, even though your life ain't worth a dime today. Even though the rest of the world, those that have power in the world, are doing fine and you still running so far behind, yet you saved. That 2,000 years ago, this white man defeated the devil on the cross, yet the devil has committed the worst crime that anybody has ever committed on the face of the earth, which is the African slave trade and the invasion of the African continent. There is no crime to measure up to that. Now, if the devil was defeated, how did he come out of the ring defeated? When Muhammad Ali knocked the sucker out, he was out. There's no question. Who won the fight? If Jesus knocked the devil out, I want to know why he's still so active. Hey, that's a question that young people are asking today. Don't get on your high, arrogant horses talking about, oh, he's talking against my faith and my belief, and why won't the young ones come back to the church? You got to start talking something with some logic. It makes some sense to them. I guess I ain't going to never be able to make a living, Brother Alvin. Therefore, it can be said that all black and other non-white Christians worship the white man as God. And that's the thing, one of the things we must keep in mind. A few more things on that, and then I'll get to the other aspects of the message. This is what Dr. Francis Welsing recommends. First, blacks and other non-white peoples should begin to consciously practice the removal, the what? Of this white image of the Son of God from their brain computers. We got to talking about I thought this issue was settled 30 years ago. We had the Temple of the Black Messiah in Banneker City. Now, y'all know where that is, because you know I ain't going to call it what they call it. We had, you know where Banneker City is? Well, you think about it then anyway. You know your history. We have the Temple of the Black Messiah there that went up, in 1969. We preached this strong. I mean, it was going good. There was a shrine of the Black Madonna. Reverend Jeramogi, he was spreading the word about the Black Messiah and the Black Madonna. I said, well, we done settled that. We can move on now. This ain't no more to talk about this. We done proved everything you can prove. 30 years later, it's still a question. 30 years later, it's still a question. Therefore, we still have the job of removing from our brain computers this image of white supremacy of Jesus as the Son of God. One group, one religious group, in opposition to us just stating a fact what the Bible and history has said about Jesus, was marching around saying, let's get rid of all imagery. What are you going on a campaign to do that for? Of all the things black folks can fight this system about, why are you going on that campaign? Because if you take down every white Jesus in every white church, you're still going to have it where? In the brain computer. That's where you have to get rid of it. Because your image is merely a reflection. The images that you create are merely reflections of what? What is in your mind. Y'all still all right? Am I boring you? Okay. Y'all let me know about the time now. Okay. Secondly, blacks and other non-whites must practice utilizing their energy crystallizations, that is, their bodies, as direct connections with the cosmic, that is, God force, the source of all energy. This means that we must learn to use our personal antennae to connect up with the true source from which all energy and power flows. No, you can't do that. You got to have a priest. You got to have a preacher. Somebody that you pay to make connection with your God that revealed itself to you while you were in your mother's womb. That's because you're trying to connect up with somebody else's God. If you're trying to connect up with yours, you don't need nobody to do that. Spiritual direction, spiritual help, spiritual advice, yes. But nobody can stand between you. And the white boys really came up with that. We are the mediators between. And I mean, they cooked up a hierarchy. There's God, and there's Jesus, and Jesus is the mediator for the world, and then he had to come down and get some priests to be mediators for him. When do I make the connection? I like that song that the old folks used to sing. God is still on the throne. Within your bosom, you have a telephone. And that's how I look at it. When I want to talk to the Creator, I dial the number. It's in my bosom, the telephone. Now, I'm not putting down spiritual people who function in a spiritual office, who serve the community, who do what? Because as Jerusalem Slim said, those who would be greatest among you must be your. If you ain't serving, you ain't great. That's the road to greatness. If there's no service, there's no greatness. Okay, y'all still with me? So we have to have that personal connection. Let's dispense with the idea of religion right now. I'm not telling you you can go back to your church and everything, but right now I want you to dispense with the whole idea of religion and everything and just think about, I want to make my personal connection with my Creator, with the divine intelligence in the universe that called all life and energy into being. That's the first thing I want to connect up with before I try to name it anything. All right? I want to make sure I got that hook up. And you can only have that in your black self, for that is your experience, the African experience. So you have to come at it in that direction. Are you with me? By so learning to tune into the cosmic energy source, it is possible to find the purpose of one's particular energy configuration. Every one of us have a divine purpose for being on this planet. Most of us live and die and don't even know why we're here. And when you don't know why you're here, and you don't know what your nia is, what is that, the sixth principle in Nguzo Saba? Your purpose is the fifth principle of the Nguzo Saba. Then you do what? Serve somebody else's purpose. But a purpose will be served. I like to serve my purposes and the purposes of my people. It's a particular energy configuration of one's body to tap into and use that source of cosmic energy for constructive purposes. All too often, we are not connecting our own personal energy configurations directly into the cosmic energy source, and consequently the results have been catastrophic. I'm going to close out there. Thank you so much, Sister Francis, for helping me out here. I appreciate it. Now, let's start getting more into the man, Jesus himself. I had to lay a solid groundwork here, Sister Zaya. Had to lay a solid ground foundation. And I guess that's part of the problem of being a preacher and a professor. It kind of gets mixed up a little bit sometimes. I'm going to read from Hugh J. Schoenfield, a European writer, from his book, The Passover Pot. And I think it's apropos to this subject. He says, far too many Christians do not know God in any other way than through Jesus. And I really would like to just speak to that a second. We get arrogant about it too. I don't like the way the Christian religion puts that. There is no other name under heaven by which you may be saved. That's arrogant. That was put in there in the 4th century. When did I say? The 4th century. 400 years after Jesus. It was put in there because those Europeans wanted to control the world through their military adaptation through the Roman Empire that was falling, through their co-optation of Christianity. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 of the Common Era, they decided there is no other name under heaven by which you may be saved. This was decided by white men. Not by Jesus. Not by the apostles. Not by Almighty God, but by white men. And you go around with that so arrogantly, beating each other down. There's no other name by which you may be saved. But them Muslims, don't you think I ain't got something for you? There's no other God but Allah. And Muhammad is his prophet. Even so far as accept Islam or die. I'm talking about the history now. No. You're not serving God when you do this. You're serving your own ego or the ego of some group of people who wanted to control large groups of people. You don't believe in Jesus, then you're godless. And it's foolishness. He goes on to say, take away the deity of Jesus and their faith in God is imperiled or destroyed. A lot of reasons why people don't want to deal with the historical Jesus is they're afraid it will affect their relationship with God. If I don't believe what I've been taught all these years, if I don't hold on to that, I'm going to lose my faith in God. That should say something to you right there. If your faith in God is predicated on a doctrine rather than your actual spiritual relationship, now you really got to re-examine that. I hope you know this type of thing is very important to us now because the changing of the guard is at hand. White boy's power is going down. He's scrambling hard, but he's going down. We are being called up to power. But there are some very major corrections that have to be made before we can take that power, and we're only a stone's throw from that power, but we got to make some mental changes, some psychological and spiritual changes. And to do that, we must eradicate the corrosion that has been placed upon our brain computers and our spirit, the weight placed upon our spirit. When these white folks placed that weight on our spirit, it separated us from a direct line that we had always had with our Creator. Therefore, we cease to accomplish things on the great level that we had before they interrupted our spiritual, mental, and physical development on this earth. So you must remember that. And again, I must, at the risk of being redundant, say that most everything you know about Christianity was learned on the plantation first. So basically, it's a plantation theology. Oh, Lord, I'm in trouble, man. I can't stay in trouble. Because Jesus is not worshipped, he is not thereby invariably played down or diminished in effectiveness. Rather, we should be strengthened and encouraged because he is bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. The mind that was in the Messiah can therefore also be in us. There's a question that many young people ask me, and I tell them, you go ask the preachers because I have my answer. And I share my answer with them. I say, now you go to the preachers and you find out. This is a question they ask. Listen seriously now. If Jesus, I'm talking about the real one now, the black man, hanging on the cross was in fact God in the flesh. Is that not what fundamentalist Christianity teaches? Is that not what all Christian doctrines teach? Of all of the 500 and some different denominations. Is that not what it teaches? If he was God and the Romans killed him, and the Romans being men, who is the greater? How can a man kill God? When all of the earth is dependent upon the divine intelligence and God force in the universe to sustain it. And if that force is cut off for one iota, then all energy ceases to be. But you tell me a white man, a group of white men, killed it on a cross. Some say for 3 hours. Some say for 6 hours. The New Testament is just not really sure how long God was dead. But he resurrected, Brother Shaka. If he died for even a minute, the resurrection wouldn't mean anything. Do you all understand the logic in this? I mean, this is the kind of logic these young people have, and we be telling them, well, that's of the devil. That's not of God. That's sinful for you to think like that. And you're losing them because you're not coming to them logically. All right. Let me go a little bit more. I've got to get into this revolutionary here. The only way in which we can hope to know the real Jesus is by first becoming conscious of him as a man of his own time, country, and people. And that's what, for the few brief moments I have left, I'm going to deal with. The Jesus of history can be more correctly known only by those who are willing to see him as a Hebrew Messiah. And that's the first thing you got to understand. He was not a Catholic Messiah. He was not a Baptist Messiah. He was not a Methodist Messiah or a born-again Christian Messiah or a right-wing fundamentalist Messiah. He was a Hebrew. Plain and simple. Before Michelangelo, any of the Italians or the Dutch or anybody decided to paint him differently, that is what he was. Now, Justinian II knew who he was. Put him on his money. He was bound down to a black man. Look at the picture on the tape out there. I verified it when I was in England. It's there. It's there. That coin, going back to the 8th century. White folks knew who they were worshiping. That's strange how that thing went, too. They started out worshiping you, now you worshiping them. Good Lord. Woo! The only way in which we can hope to know the real Jesus is by first becoming conscious of him as a man of his own time, country, and people. The Jesus of history can be more correctly known only by those who are willing to see him as a Hebrew Messiah. The gospel writers tried to tone down the national and political implications of this cardinal doctrine, but they still affirmed it. Now, I was going to try to read some other material, but I'm going to go into the text in a minute. In the book, Jesus and the Zealots by Hugh J. Schoen, Dr. S.G.F. Brandon at Manchester University. Many see the white theologians be reading all this stuff. Black theologians scared to even touch this. They be debating this issue. Black preachers, they don't want to debate this issue. They don't want God to strike them with lightning. And as Sister Francis said, where their brain computers hooked up, they don't want that white man to strike them with lightning. It's forbidden for black people to discuss this. But the gospel writers tried to cover up the fact that Jesus was a revolutionary. But we're going to go in those Gospels and show that even though they tried to cover it up, it came out anyway. Why did they try to cover it up? First of all, brothers and sisters, listen to me now. There was no gospel written. The word gospel meaning what? Good news. We'll deal with that in a moment. But in this instance, biographies on the life of Christ. There were no Gospels written while Jesus was alive. What did I say? There was not one word written, maybe in the Roman newspaper. Suetonius and Tacitus were supposed to have written something. But no Hebrew wrote anything about him while he was alive. It was some 40 to 50 years after his death that they began to write about him and tried to remember what they had heard. And they had only stories that had passed from one group to the next. The first gospel to be written, although it is not in that order in the New Testament that we know of, is the Gospel of Mark, written somewhere between 65 and 75 of this era. There were at least 70 Gospels written. Only 4 of them survived because they were the 4 that the bishops at the Council of Nicaea figured they could edit and twist to suit their doctrinal needs. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, that speaks about Jesus being married, and you've got to get that tape I got back there, the marital life of Jesus and his son Barabbas. They had to take those out because it didn't go along with the doctrine that they wanted. They were killing people for even reading them back then, but that's another story. I discussed that on the African origin of the Christian church. Now, the Gospel of Mark was written almost immediately after the fall of the capital of the Judeans, the Hebrew Israelites, the African Israelites, in 70 of this era. They had begun another rebellion of the many rebellions they had against the Romans. They had another rebellion in 66 of this era. And for 4 years, they declared themselves free and independent of the Romans. The Romans came back with the 10th Legion, the leopard men, out of Africa. They used Africans to destroy Africans. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? White folks can't take us on their own. I tell you, white folks, they said, the reason why white man won in Africa is he had guns. There wasn't what? 60 million white people in all of Europe at that time. And Africa had hundreds of millions of people on it. Every white person in Europe had a gun. They couldn't have took Africa. So they had to use Africans to take Africa. Learn from that. So here they used Africans against Africans, and they destroyed the city of Jerusalem and scattered them all over everywhere. Now, some of the white folks who were unhappy with the Roman Empire and were looking for a new philosophy had been led by the Apostle Paul, who was a traitor to his race, who wanted to be a Roman rather than a Hebrew, but that's another story. They had adopted what they called eventually Christianity. But the prophet of it had been crucified as a rebel. That's what the record says. We'll deal with that in a minute. Now they were caught up with the problem because the Romans were identifying them with the rebels in Jerusalem. So when the Gospel of Mark was produced in Rome, it was an apologia, laying the blame of it all on the Jews and on the Jewish rebels, and saying that Jesus was innocent of the charges brought against him, and that the Jews had caused him to be killed. The gospel writers tried to tone down the national and political implications of this cardinal doctrine, but they still affirmed it. It simply could not be eradicated. But every step they took to depict Jesus in another guise took them further from him. We cannot now find him again by falling into the same error. One more statement from Jesus and the Zealots, and then we get into the text, and we'll be coming on down the line. Jesus and the Zealots by S.G.F. Brandon says this. The very first paragraph in the very first chapter of the book states very clearly, ironic though it be, the most certain thing known about Jesus of Nazareth, the most what? Everything else is a matter of belief and speculation. The only thing Brandon says, this is a white Christian theologian. He says the only thing we know certain about Jesus of Nazareth is that he was crucified by the Romans as a rebel against their government in Judea. Crucified as a what? That's what the record says. That's what it says. And even the New Testament tells you that. That was the charge brought against him. What was the charge? He stirreth up the people. Which in today's words would be what? Troublemaker. Terrorist. Inciting to riot. That's what the Romans charged him with, and that's what they killed him for. They didn't care if he talked about God. They had so many religions in Rome, it did not make any difference to them. And had he been the pacifist that everybody said he was, they would have welcomed him with open arms. Say, maybe you can cool some of these niggas out, because they keep rebelling all the time. If you can walk throughout the land and get these big crowds around and cool these people down, why, you're a good friend of Rome. But Rome hung him on a cross. And because of some charges that the Jews brought against him. He said he was going to tear the temple down. The Romans couldn't care nothing about the Jewish temple. They didn't care. Say, I wish he would tear it down because it's a trouble spot. And so many rebels develop up in that temple. I wish he had to tone it down. We put the Roman eagle up there and they went to war over that. We took the money from the temple treasury to build an aqueduct. They went to war over that. Well, every time you go within 10 feet of the temple, those Negroes go to war. Yeah, let him tear it up. They wouldn't have crucified him for that. Do you see the logic that I'm trying to present to you historically? And it says that this fact of him being a rebel is recorded in the 4 Christian Gospels. It's in there. We'll deal with it in a second. And the execution on the order of Pontius Pilate is mentioned by the Roman historian Tacitus, writing early in the 2nd century. The fact itself in terms of current Romano-Jewish relations in Judea was not particularly remarkable. The Jewish historian Josephus records numerous instances during that period concerned of the crucifixion of Jewish rebels by Romans. That's the way Romans, and I've mentioned that before, killed anybody who rebelled against them. They hung them on the cross, which was the same as what we know today as a what? A lynching. A lynching. Okay, now let's go into the Bible for a minute. Luke, the 4th chapter and the 18th verse. What we have here is a man, you can go and read the whole 4th chapter when you go back, who have been traveling the countryside and have become very famous. And he is now coming home to the city of Nazareth. From what I've heard about Nazareth, it was no place to go back home to. It was a rough place. And it was in the center of Galilee, which was the hotbed of resistance against the Roman Empire. That's where the Bamers lived. And they fought against the Romans. And when they couldn't win in the regular, they went up in the hills and they fought. And the people of Nazareth and other places kept supplying them with what they needed to fight those Romans. This is what was going on in the world at that time. When they said we're looking for a Messiah, they wasn't looking for somebody to come and die and save the world. That concept did not exist among the Hebrews. That was a concept later developed by someone and enforced several hundred years later. Nobody, while Jesus walked this earth, had the idea of him dying to save the world from sin, historically. This was written later. The earliest of the Gospels you have now, as far as you can go back in manuscript, is 400 years of this era. Now, you know, in a period of 400 years after a fact, when you got to go by word of mouth, but it was inspired of God. What if it was inspired of God? How come those Gospels cannot agree on just how long he was on the cross? God don't make those kind of mistakes. But if I can't get to it, I'm going to give you the text tonight so you can go home and read it for yourself. Don't get mad. This stuff was something that human beings decided to put together. If you got to leave, stop by that table. I better hurry up and cut it down now, boy. So I'm walking. He's coming home now. It's the beginning of his ministry. And he has a cadre of black men with him. Among them was one called Simon Zelotes. He was a zealot. Now, if Jesus wasn't working with the zealots, who were like the Black Panther party of that day, in fact, their symbol was a Black Panther, according to Godfrey Higgins in Anacalypsis. Their symbol was a Black Panther. Why was he having them all up in his cadre if he wasn't hooked up with that? Said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. Now, the word gospel means good news. there's only one kind of good news that you can give a poor man. And what is that? What is that? How to get out of this poverty. There ain't no other good news for a poor man on how to get me out this mess. There ain't no other. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted. Those people whose spirit had been broken, who had lost confidence in themselves because they were being oppressed on their own land by another. He said, I come to change that now, to preach deliverance to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. And in the New English translation it says, to set the downtrodden free. Now for a man to stand up in his religious institution, the synagogue, and to declare that the Spirit of the Lord had sent him to feed the poor and to set the downtrodden free was an outright challenge to the Roman Empire and the Negro preachers of that day who were working in collaboration with the Roman Empire. What about the entry into Jerusalem? We're coming down now. What was that all about? Jesus riding on a donkey? Palm Sunday. People coming out with palm leaves waving. Praising this man riding on this donkey. What did they say? In John 12:13, you can write it down. In Mark 11:10, say, Hosanna to the King of Israel. To the what? Not to God out of heaven, to the King of Israel. But the text in Mark goes on and puts it even further. It says, Hosanna and glory to him that cometh in the name of the kingdom of our father David, which had been the first king of Israel. What are we talking about here? What type of frame of reference are we talking about? A religious frame of reference or a political frame of reference? Both, because their religion and their politics were one and the same. We talked about his arrest and his trial. We talked about the crucifixion. Also in Luke, the 22nd chapter, in the 36th verse, it says that now, he says, I came not to bring peace, but fire and a sword. Those are violent words. Matthew 10:34, he violently drove the money changers out of the temple. You've heard me describe that before. That was a violent act. Matthew 21:12-14 says, now is the time to sell your coat and buy a sword. Said things have got so bad, brother. Sell your clothes and buy you something to fight with. Sell your clothes and get you a Roscoe, get you a piece. Next time you show up, come out full dressed. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Ready for action. When they went in there after him, the first thing Peter did was what? Drew his sword and started hacking people. If Jesus didn't want him to have a sword, why did he have one? But then they put in that apologetic thing, Peter, put up your sword, without asking the question, why did he have it in the first place? Jesus was a pacifist and nonviolent. He couldn't have went up in there with one. When they came to him about the incident about the money, this was a big deal with the Hebrew people, whether they should pay taxes to a foreign invader or not, whether they should take their money and pay taxes to help somebody to continue to oppress them. And a popular leader among them could not go with that or he would not be popular. And they came to him, they said, should we, these were the preachers. The preachers were trying to trap him so that they could get him and say, well, tax evasion. So Romans, y'all can get him because he ain't paying no taxes. Should we pay tribute to Caesar? So Jerusalem Slim, being the wise brother that he was, looked at him and said, show me a piece of money. Say, who put you on that money? Say, Caesar. Well, you give to Caesar that which is Caesar and God that which is God. Now, what did the Hebrews teach was God? The land, they said, belonged to God. And they said it was their religious duty not to allow anyone to rule over them but Almighty God. That was their concept. That was their belief. That is what Jesus was raised with. That is what Jesus went by throughout his entire life. Coming to a close now for real. Brothers and sisters, in stating this, and this has only been a cursory investigation unto the subject. I'm going to give you some text I want you to read. You write them down. I'll tell you what they're about. Read Matthew, the 27th and the 28th verse. Chapters, Mark, the 15th and the 16th chapters. Luke, the 23rd, the 22nd. Okay. Matthew 27 chapter and the 28th chapter. Yeah. Mark, the 15th chapter and the 16th chapter. Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 23rd chapter, and the 24th chapter. 22nd chapter, the 23rd chapter, and the 24th chapter. I don't have time to give you the verses, just read the chapter. John, the 18th chapter, the 19th chapter, and the 20th chapter. And why did I want you to read that? Because one of them says that very early in the morning, the Jews took Jesus to Pilate to be tried by him. But another says that Pilate, in fact, in the Gospel of John, does not put Jesus on trial until 12 in the afternoon. The Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark say that Jesus was on the cross by 9 o'clock in the morning. That's what it says. Because they broke it down to the 3rd hour of the day, the 6th hour of the day. They did it like that. But if you know how to decipher the time, you can tell there's a discrepancy in the time, whether you know their method or not. But we just happen to know what time that is. I'm just giving you in English. Matthew and Mark say he's already on the cross at 9 o'clock in the morning. They have already nailed him on this cross and put him up there. And from 6 o'clock, or from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, darkness came all over the earth. And then he gave up the ghost and died around about the setting of the sun, about 6 o'clock. John says that Pilate did not even have him in court until the 6th hour of the day, which is 12 noon. What happened? If Pilate doesn't have him in court until noontime, how does he get on the cross at 9 o'clock in the morning? You got to try him, convict him, they beat him up, they made him drag the cross, and if you ever been to Jerusalem, those streets are like his hair. He had to drag the cross all out there, and then about a half a mile on out to Golgotha to Calvary. That's after 12 o'clock, also. After the trial at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock after the trial, he had to do all that according to John. No telling how long it took to do that. So when did he actually get on the cross? Because you read this for yourself and see if you see this discrepancy. The gospel writers are not in agreement. Now they say he was in, I talked about this when I was in England. A white preacher came out, and he had a grin on his face, Brother Jeffers, because he said, they ain't going to know nothing about the Nicene Council and all this here theological and historical jargon. I can still get them. And I watched that cracker sit there with a grin on his face. And he grinned through that whole message. And then I pulled my Bible up from under there. And I opened it up and I went to work on each one of them texts. And he shot out that door. Because you know where you can explain that. You tell me that Jesus was in, now what does the Christian doctrine say? I'm about to come to a close, but I want to ask you this. What does it say? How long was he in the ground? 3 days and what? Is that what it says? The New Testament says that by the 12th hour, which is 6 o'clock, they had to take him off the cross because they couldn't leave him up there for Passover, and that the sun was setting for the Sabbath. And the Hebrew Sabbath was from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, not Sunday. That's white folks' Sabbath. They came up with. The Pope of Rome came up with. Let me get off that now. But they had to get him off the cross by what? Before sunset Friday. He's in the tomb Saturday. But the New Testament says that very early in the morning, the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene comes and he's gone. Now, how many hours is that? From 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock Saturday would be 24. And from 6 o'clock in the evening to early in the morning before the rising of the sun, 6 o'clock. So how many hours you got there? 24 and 6. You got 36. That is not 3 days in anybody's language. So you got a problem right there. But then you go on and you find out as you read this that one of them says that an angel came down, or that Mary Magdalene now, didn't say anything about anybody else. And you get that tape, the marital life of Jesus and his son Barabbas, and you find out why Mary Magdalene was so special to him. Say Mary Magdalene comes early in the morning, said by herself. It's either Matthew or Mark, one of them. I think it is Matthew. And when she gets there, something happens. An angel comes down out of heaven, takes the stone, rolls it away, lightnings all over everywhere. She gets dead. Sits on the stone, the text says, and tells Mary, go back and tell his disciples that he is resurrected. But then Mark says, early in the morning, Mary and another Mary and somebody come and they're asking each other, how shall we get this stone away? It's so heavy. And when they get there, the stone is already rolled away. Now, Matthew said it wasn't rolled away until the angel came out of heaven with thunder and lightning and knocked it out the way, and she was there to witness it. But Mark and Luke says, but once they get there, it's already rolled away. And they found the stone rolled away. And instead of an angel sitting on top of a stone, it's two men. One say two men inside the tomb say, he is not here. Why seek ye the living among the dead? And another say, it's two men standing outside of the tomb. Say he is resurrected. John said Mary, the mother of James and Salome, Joanna, and a bunch of women showed up at the tomb. How many women showed up at the tomb? Was the stone rolled away, or did it roll away when they got there? These are the questions. This is something God would know. First of all, God would know how long his son was on the cross. He would know how long he was in the ground. He would know when he got up. Only men would be confused about those particulars. So, brothers and sisters, I know you don't like it. But this cannot be the word of God if it's got that many contradictions in it. I'm not telling you to throw it away. I'm not telling you to put it down, because it has a lot of our history in it. It has a lot of principles that have been co-opted and taken from our ancient things. Use it as Nat Turner used it. Use it as a book. When Nat Turner read it, it moved him to fight for freedom. When Gabriel Prosser read it, it drove him to fight for freedom. When Harriet Tubman read it, it drove her to fight for freedom. In fact, white folks didn't even want you to read the Bible because they were afraid you would get some things like that. The only text that you could know was, slave, obey your master. The only time you could preach a text is the text that the white man gave. In closing, you may have heard this story before. I hope you haven't. But I'm getting old now, y'all. You know how old folks are. We tell the same stories over and over again. The story, I was down in Houston, Texas, doing a seminar on this. And there was a bunch of ministers there. And I didn't even get into some of the details I'm going into with y'all. I was just dealing with the fact that Jesus was black and things like that, making it acceptable to them, And because some brothers be pleading when I come to church, well, we don't want to hit them too hard. And I can't replace nobody's job, so I can't preach like this in no church. That's why I show my behind when I get here. I can't do this. I got to be cool in the church. I can't do it. So I have to talk that ecclesiastical jargon. You understand? And I can talk it. And so several of these brothers were very moved by what was taught there, and by the logic and reason thereof, and by the historical documentation set before them. And they went back to their churches. Did y'all hear this story? They went back to their churches, and when I came to Houston again, they had several different reports for me. One man, he had a lot of power in his church, so things worked a little differently for him. One man, the church board, the deacon board and the trustees actually decide whether he could keep his job or not. And this is what happened. They went back and they preached and they showed from the Bible, Revelation, the 1st chapter, the 13th to the 15th verse, they had hair like lamb's wool and like gleaming bronze, and they did the whole thing. And they talked about the coins, and they talked about all of the icons of Jesus all over the Western world. It was of a black man. They went through the whole thing. And one brother's congregation said, I don't care. This is what they said. I don't care what the Bible say. Tell you about when this thing get in your brain computer now. I don't care what the Bible say. I don't care what history say. Because what he told them, we got to take, like Francis said, we got to get rid of all this white supremacist imagery. They said, if you take that picture down off that wall, you better get you another job. You will not be preaching here next Sunday. In other words, they didn't care what the Bible said. They didn't care what the truth was. This white man was the endorsement of their conceptualization of God, and don't you remove it. That's what that was. The other preacher was a little more successful, I'm glad to report. He told them, he went through the whole thing. He said, now next Sunday we're going to have a ceremony. This is long before Archbishop Stallings or anything. So we're going to have a ceremony. And we're going to take this white man down off the wall. And we're going to put a black man that represents our Lord and Savior up there. And he had such power in his church they couldn't fire him. But the day that they took it down, Brother Jack Feather, the day they took it down, Mother Franklin, the people were weeping like the slaves used to weep when Massa died. It's been up there so long. It was there from the first founding of the church. It's just so wrong. But he took it down. Brothers and sisters, we want to keep good relations with our families and our loved ones as much best as we can, and we should. We don't want to go around making enemies among one another, but we cannot let anything keep us from dealing with the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And it says we must be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And one of the first steps in the renewal of the mind and the step towards the reinstitution of global black power, of what? Global black power, ruled in justice and righteousness. All people will live good under us, because the Bible says when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Our history said that we ruled justly and rightly by the principles of Ma'at. And we will do it again once we clean this white man's ways out of our souls, out of our spirits, and out of our minds. And one of the first ways to do it is to get rid of that white supremacist imagery in your brain computer. Peace be unto you, my brothers and sisters.